What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another draft profile. And today, we are talking about maybe one of the best linebackers in this year's draft class. A guy that I could see by the time we're at draft time, he is just flying up people's boards, and he ends up going way earlier than maybe a lot of people expected at this time of recording. But I could also see the other side where maybe he slips through the draft a little bit, and guys start going ahead of him that have more of a today type of feel. Like, you know, the smaller type of linebacker that's 220 pounds. He's just completely sideline to sideline. You don't want to get him picked up at the second level, but he's extremely fast. So today, we're talking about an inside linebacker that played in this year's Senior Bowl. So let's get it started.
The city's been down, and it found a way to get up. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down. We're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Welcome everybody to another video. Glad you guys are here. And I love doing these draft profiles. And today, we're talking about a linebacker that has been talked about on this channel many times. He's probably been talked about on other channels as well for probably every single team. And that is linebacker Chad Muma from Wyoming. All right. Now, this was a linebacker that did participate in this year's Senior Bowl, and I would say he had a pretty good showing, at least in the game. He had 9 tackles in that game, 5 solo tackles. He led that game in tackles. He also had an interception that just went right through his hands, so he had potential to probably have a pick 6 in that one too, but unable to come up with the football. First off, you can't deny the guy's production. The amount of tackles that he had last season. I don't know if he finished the season as the leading tackler in FBS, but at one point he was the leading tackler in FBS during the Kent State game. He had 142 total tackles last season. That's crazy. He had 1.5 sacks, 3 interceptions last season, and 3 interceptions. Statistically, it's hard to deny that. Plus, they had Logan Wilson the year before, and now that the Bengals are in the Super Bowl, obviously those guys get a lot of attention. So then you're like, oh snap, they were teammates. We've talked about it before. Of course, a very big part of this is the scheme fit and whether or not you feel like he would fit for your team going forward. And then there's, of course, all the intangibles that go with it as well as the type of player that you want on your team. You know, all those little things that go into it. So today I thought we'd talk about that. We talk about Chad Muma a little bit. We're also going to talk about maybe some of the reasons and some of the things that he does well that I think would translate to what the Lions may be looking to do defensively and why he would fit, but also some of the areas that maybe aren't his strengths or maybe something that he lacks and why that could steer the Lions in a different direction. I think there's some interesting comparisons that you can make and say, oh, okay, this is how I could see how that would fit. And then there's some other sides of it. You're like, okay, yeah, that may not be the case of what the Lions are going to do. So I guess we already dove into the numbers. Now, of course, he wasn't playing the best competition, and that's always going to come up. And that's why it was so important that he had a good Senior Bowl. And from really everything that I've seen of what people have said about the Senior Bowl, one of their takeaways was that Chad Muma impressed and he won, you know, at the Senior Bowl. They say, oh, who won and who lost from the Senior Bowl? He was a winner from the Senior Bowl. It was kind of hard to judge the linebacker position a little bit, you know, especially just based on the game if you don't have like a replay of it to see what he's actually doing. I didn't realize the guy led the team in tackles in that game, but I guess he did. Now, in coverage, he also put up some good numbers. So we said the 3 interceptions. He allowed 1 touchdown, 26 completions on 30 targets, equaled out to a 77.5 passer rating allowed. That's really good. A 77.5 passer rating allowed is really good for a linebacker. Yeah, it's a high completion percentage. That's usually the case with linebackers. It usually is, depending on how they're playing defensively. Now, if you're playing a ton of man coverage, that can be a little bit more concerning. If you're playing more zone coverage, a high completion percentage is something that you usually see. Now, there are linebackers in this class with better statistics. Those are provided by Pro Football Focus. There's other linebackers with better statistics, like a Troy Anderson from Montana State. This is a player that I could see easily ride up boards where we're coming to draft time and he's looked at as possibly the 2nd, maybe 3rd linebacker in this year's draft class. I could easily see that happening because he's pretty well polished. He played at Wyoming for 4 seasons, so he has tons of experience there. You talk about his background being a safety in high school, transitioning to the linebacker position. Of course, the connection with Logan Hall. He's a good athlete for his size at 6'3", 242 pounds. When you tie all those things together, that can intrigue and interest a lot of teams, especially coming off of the season that he just had. Less and less teams are using those bigger body linebackers that just aren't that quick in space. You're seeing more of the quicker linebackers. And the Lions could also attack that approach in this year's draft as well. If they do grab an off-ball linebacker in this year's draft, it seems like they will. It's a position that Dan Campbell brought up, even though he's not going to give anything away, which he's actually going to do. I don't think the Lions met with Chad Muma, but other teams did, but I don't really put that into consideration because I remember at one point the Lions didn't want to meet with guys that they would draft for that exact reason because they didn't want to give away who they may be interested in. So you really just never know until it comes draft time. Lions could, I mean, they could dip into one of those other spots and go get a guy like maybe like Brandon Smith, who was way less polished in college for Penn State, but he also could be a much better athlete at a similar size. Or you can slide to some of those smaller linebackers. You guys have brought up Sewell's brother out of Utah. He's a way smaller linebacker. I mean, he looks small in film. He's like 6'1", 220. I'm sure me and Red will do a video on a guy like that at some point. Or Troy Anderson from a Montana State. The Sterling Weatherford, you get from Miami of Ohio, who's basically a linebacker slash safety, so he's a little bit smaller as well. Let's talk about what he did with Wyoming first. So he played in pretty much a 4-2-5 defense, which is what the Saints ran where Aaron Glenn came from, was a 4-2-5 defense. It's a sub-package defense. So you got your 4 down linemen, which is your even front, and then you have your 2 inside linebackers. Then you just have 5 defensive backs. Of course, there was some movement within that. He held down the Mike linebacker position. It's a position that he takes a lot of pride in, being the main communicator defensively, relaying the call to everybody defensively. Of course, he credits a lot of his film preparation and his ability to diagnose plays very fast. So a lot of people believe that would be the immediate transition to him. The best transition for him would be to come on your team and be your Mike linebacker. But of course, if that was the case with the Lions, Derek Barnes looks like he's going to be the Lions' Mike linebacker going forward. But that's what it looks like the direction the Lions are going to take this. Last year was kind of just a learning year, understanding that he's only played off-ball linebacker for 1 season. So we're going to sign Alex Anzalone, get a vet in this group, and we'll give him time to learn and improve throughout the season. I think we saw that. We saw him improve. We saw him learn. We saw him get better throughout the season. And Alex Anzalone went down with the season-ending injury, so he was forced to play a little bit more defensively for us. But now it looks like heading into 2022, AA, sadly, may not be back. Shout out to that picture, though. That picture is clean. Duracell, we see you. But he may not be back. So now maybe Derek Barnes' role to hold down. And could this be a good partner with Derek Barnes, right? I'm not trying to draft a Derek Barnes replacement. Could these guys play well together? And I think there's reasons to believe that they definitely could, but also some reasons to point to of, okay, well, maybe better to go a different direction. And I want to hit on all of those. So immediately when I look at a guy like Chad Muma at his build, 6'3", 240 pounds, at this 40 time, we'll see what he runs. I think a lot of people are projecting around a 4.68 kind of mark. We'll see what he runs. I could see him going a little faster than that, maybe a little slower. We'll see. I could see it being in that range, but immediately I start to look at other guys, of course, with the Saints. You're coming off of last year where they drafted Pete Werner out of Ohio State. Now they still have Demario Davis. They have Quan Alexander, and Pete Werner, we saw him a lot more early in the season, was kind of rotational. We're looking at him to take a bigger step forward, and he could be the Quan Alexander replacement right down the road, but he had a really nice season when he was on the field. I see some similarities in build there. Now, Pete Werner ran a really nice 40, so I think Chad Muma would have to really impress to push near that time, and he'd have to do something I don't think a lot of people would be expecting. So I immediately look at that and I'm like, okay, I could see some similarities there. Pete Werner, defensive for Ohio State, played a lot of different positions for them. I think he was looked at more of a Sam or an outside linebacker coming into it anyway. Look at a guy like Alex Anzalone. This was another Senior Bowl player who has a pretty similar build, 6'3", 241 pounds, almost the exact same build, very similar arm length. Like there's like this much differential, a couple of inches, not even inches, like centimeters separate the difference in arm length between Alex Anzalone, Chad Muma. So in terms of build, you can see why, okay, yeah, I could see how this could fit together. They could have 2 linebackers like the New Orleans Saints. That's kind of in that, 6'2", 6'3", 240 pound range. The big question is, though, can he handle the assignments of being able to drop into coverage, handle some of those zone drop responsibilities that we saw Alex Anzalone have? Can he blitz? Can he get after the quarterback? Can he stop the run? And I think one major difference with Chad Muma that's interesting is that some of those guys I just mentioned, specifically like in Alex Anzalone, he came out as being a little bit more known for what he does in coverage, being able to pick up on seams and run those through the play, his zone coverage work. Even though he didn't have any interceptions and he had all the injuries he dealt with, he was much more known for what he did in coverage rather than what he did against the run. Now, I'm saying this not as if Chad Muma wasn't good in coverage, because he was pretty good in coverage, and we'll get to that, but he is also really well known for what he did against the run, because he was actually fantastic as a run defender. You could argue this was his best trait. So you may be getting best of both worlds when you look at a guy like Chad Muma. So let's start there. Let's take that transition. Let's dive into this run defense. We're going to hit on everything here, but specifically I want to talk about reasons that I think it would fit and why it could work with this, and then maybe just some of my concerns I have at each category. So we're going to go through run defense, man coverage, zone coverage, blitzing, and then of course some traits and little things that we want to throw in at the end here. So let's start off with run defense. We hit on the numbers to begin the show, and you could see that he has a lot of tackles, okay? okay? He is involved in a lot of tackles, and the same thing showed up in the Senior Bowl. He just finds a way to get his hands on the ball carrier. I mean, it's just as simple as that. I mean, he's like one of the only guys in college football that can actually compete with a player like Devin Lloyd and the production that he had against the run. And Devin Lloyd, by a lot of people, is projected to be the top linebacker in this year's class. I have him as my number one linebacker right now, so, you know, we'll see how it all shakes out. I watched a lot of players today, okay, especially receivers. Receivers was like an all-day sucker, and I don't even have a video on a receiver today. I was actually kind of not impressed with some of the players that I was hoping to be impressed by, but I got a lot of notes. Anyway, back to the Chad Muma stuff. Let's start with the run defense. What do I like as a run defender? Well, one couple things that you'll see about Chad Muma, no matter where you look, when people talk about his strengths, you'll see them talk about his instincts. You'll see them talk about his efficiency as a run defender, him being a very reliable tackler, and all those things show up. The production that he had, averaging about 12 tackles a game. They talk about the lack of missed tackles, which is a good thing. He doesn't have many missed tackles. Statistically speaking, he doesn't miss a lot of tackles once he gets his hands on the ball carrier. Now, I do have one little setback to that, is that he can miss tackles. Maybe not like the way you're thinking is like, oh, he's got him and then they run through him. More missing tackles in that he can, like a lot of linebackers, have occasional plays where he'll overrun. Now, I think he does it a little bit differently. He's not the fastest linebacker, even though he's got some good speed. We'll get to that. Look at that guy, it's 240. You know, I've seen guys that are 240, 250, and you put them on like last year, and it's like they're walking in mud. It's like, really? That's the difference between 20 pounds? This is not the case. I think a big reason is because he was a safety back in high school. I mean, he can move, no question, from sideline to sideline. So I could see him putting up a good 40 time, and a projected 4.68 is pretty darn solid for a guy that's 240 pounds. Anticipating a certain angle that the running back is going to take and getting a little bit too wide on those angle projections, getting a little bit too far outside and allowing the running back to cut back upfield. And at that point, I guess he basically just kind of overran the play. I would say I counted at least 3 of those, at least 3 times that he did that. So you will see that from time to time. The best thing about this is usually he's forcing the play back into the inside because he's usually jumping outside, projecting the angle where the running back is going to be, like if you're passing a football. So usually he's jumping to the outside and guys are cutting back upfield. So at least that's a benefit, but you will see a few here and there missed tackles in that way. Another way you could see a couple of extra yards given up, not necessarily always much missed tackles here as just extra yards, as he can tackle a little high. He's got a pretty solid height at 6'3". He's not like super low to the ground at 6 foot. So occasionally you'll also see that he does tackle high. He doesn't always break down as much as you would like him to, and he can give up an extra couple of yards. Never really showed like elite bend to get extremely low when making tackles, but usually he does a good job of breaking down and getting a little bit lower and continuing to drive his legs through the tackle. For the most part, he's a very reliable tackler, especially when you take a look at the production that he has, and he's really all over the field with it. I mean, he has really solid, I would say he has really good range for a guy at his size, and he's making plays all over the field, in the third level, in the secondary, in the backfield, sideline to sideline. He's all over the place finding ways to get production. But what sticks out to me here is what people call the instincts. The instincts is what sticks out, and I think this is where 4 years of experience comes in. He takes a lot of pride in his film study, diagnosed plays very fast, and there were a few plays where he's in the backfield before anybody else is defensively. You know, everybody's kind of playing a little patient with it, and he's back there in the backfield making a play before anybody else, and he can set someone else up, or he's the guy making the play. It seems like his keys as a run defender primarily look like they're at the running back. His secondary keys kind of seem like your guard movement. His first key usually seems to be the running back. You'll see times where he's just shooting down based on where the running back goes. Second key off of that is kind of the guard movement, or the guards pulling, because a lot of times that will take you to the ball carrier. It's not very likely you see this guy out of play. He has very good instincts, and he is very quick to read run plays and figure out where the ball is going. I mean, it was very hard to find plays where he was not in the right position, or at least in the right area defensively. There was one play that stuck out against Kent State. They did a read option with the quarterback and running back, and the quarterback held the ball extremely long where he had the wrong hole, and by the time it was that far along in the play, he couldn't see anybody over the line, and at that point it gave up, I think it was actually a touchdown run because there was no one in the hole. But aside from that play, instincts are on point. He's usually flying to the football, and that leads to so many tackles. I mean, those aren't just happening by accident. You know, it's not just because, well, he's fast or he's a good tackler. He just instinctually is always around the football. He's very efficient in this category. When you get him on the edge, for the most part, he does a really nice job of breaking down when he's on the edge and making sure who has the football, the running back or the quarterback, and he does a pretty nice job setting the edge. I mean, there was like one play where you could see he kind of stepped inside reading the running back, but he was ultimately able to bounce back outside and get the quarterback because he breaks down. You know, he's not overselling. He's patient, but at the same time, he's fast. does a good job of not necessarily being in a hurry, where he's rushing it and he's not breaking down, and then one false step and he's completely out of the play. Does a nice job breaking down. So even with that one little misstep, he can still get back to where he needs to be, set the edge, and make a play on the ball carrier. There's, of course, two little extra things that help. With his size, receivers don't really move him, especially if he knows where they are. They don't really move him, and move him out of the play, so they can't really block him out of the play. I think a lot of that has to do with his size being 240 pounds. He's not like 215 where you can just light him up. Now, he is susceptible sometimes to some of those blind side blocks where he doesn't necessarily see it coming and he can get, knocked out of the play. But aside from that, if he sees it, you're not really going to move him as a receiver. And then there's also the fact that he has that good range. He has really nice range, especially when he's able to build up. If he's not being touched at the second level and he's working sideline to sideline, he has really good speed. I'm not going to say elite, I'm not going to say great. I put him in a really good category, though, to get from sideline to sideline. For a guy, again, that's 240, it sticks out big time because he's already flowing usually the right direction, and then he can kind of close that gap as a run defender, and that'll help him big time against mobile quarterbacks as well. And that's where I get a little bit of Pete Werner vibes. We'll see if he tests out as highly as Pete Werner did, but I get vibes there because Werner had good size, yet he could still move really well. Now, there are some concerns with him as a run defender, and maybe some reasons the Lions could possibly decide to stay a little bit away from him. First off, you start with the arm length. The arm length is not necessarily long. I'm not saying he has short arms, but it's not necessarily long, and this is an area that I think he can also improve. Even just aside from the arm length, he could do a much better job when approaching offensive linemen at the second level. The shed lineman at the second level is attacking, but also shooting his hands much earlier. A lot of times you see he shoots his hands extremely late, and he can kind of get locked up and walled up by an offensive lineman. If he can continue to shoot his hands much earlier, a lot of times he beats offensive linemen by simply getting around them, doing a great job attacking half the man, and he does have enough build where I believe he could possibly get some space. I definitely don't think he's putting up 29 bench press reps. He doesn't seem like jacked like that. Now, say they have short arms. His arms measured out at 32 inches, 32 and 3/8 inches compared to Derek Barnes, who was 33 and 3/8 inches. So basically he had an extra inch longer. I mean, that's, it's not really much longer. One of the top run defending linebackers likely coming out in this year's class. I mean, I haven't seen everybody, but even just by the production alone, you could tell that would be the case. And it's never a bad thing to have that, especially after Lions run defense last year. I mean, they were really pretty bad in every category, but run defense is where it starts. You have to be able to stop the run. And it's never a bad thing to have a guy that understands the mic side of it, the communication factor. This would be his fifth year, right? He played 4 years at inside linebacker, and of course, back in high school, being a safety. Yet, I don't want that to make you think that he can't play coverage, because he's actually a pretty darn good coverage player as well. And let's break it down into the two categories as we usually do: man coverage and zone coverage. So we ran through the stats. High completion percentage allowed, of course. You could see 26 for 30, the 77.5 pass ratings, but he did have 3 interceptions. Not every interception is created equally. And again, he had a chance to get an interception at the Senior Bowl as well. But let's start with man coverage. So I don't have a ton of notes for this, but let's start there first. So first off, what do I like is man coverage? Well, usually you're going to see him play a role when he's in man coverage. He's usually lined up on a running back. Now, at times he's lined up on a tight end. I've also once seen him line up on a receiver, and that, let's just say, did not go well because the receiver had the threat to go deep, and you could see he was just super worried about that, gave him a lot of space, and they ran a slant. So this is not a player I want lined up on a receiver. I know there's other guys in this class that maybe are a little bit better at that, but I don't want to line him up straight up, on a receiver, because he just doesn't have that movement skill, especially change of direction, where he's going to be able to do that. You don't think you ever want your linebacker on a receiver, so let's just make that clear. But running backs were a lot of times his man coverage responsibilities, and I think where you really see this shine is in man coverage. His background of playing safety. It's a really nice job, because one thing that sticks out is he doesn't get grabby. He doesn't get handsy. He's not catching running backs and things like that. Like, that's what you see with a lot of these linebackers, is that they can get very physical because they're trying to slow guys down. He does a really good job, and I don't think he's going to have many penalties when he's lined up, especially on a running back, because he doesn't really grab and hold. He does an awesome job of getting in their pocket, turning, and playing it like a safety. Running back, who's usually not running a very complex route tree. It's usually like a wheel route, or it's, go vertical, line him up one-on-one. And we took a look at this with Nakobe Dean. Think Nakobe Dean may be better, but when you compare it, when you pair his size with the fact that he can turn, get his head around, right, and then keep his hand on you at the same time, it sticks out. He looks very comfortable in those situations. So man coverage on a running back, I'm going to think I can rely on that at the next level, which is going to be very important. This was a lot of what Derek Barnes' role was last season when he was asked to play coverage, was line him up on a running back because he can get out there to the flat. So that is one part. And then there's also lining up on tight ends. And even though I didn't see it that much, it seemed like he was much more of a zone coverage dropping player. Definitely think that he'd be fine, lining up on tight ends. And I don't think they'd have a huge mismatch there. I think the coverage aspect for Chad Muma is where versatility becomes the name of the game. Now, unfortunately here, I was unable, at least up to this point, to find the tight end versus linebacker / running back film. I can't find it. I've been looking for it from the Senior Bowl. I cannot find it. It's frustrating me. If I find it, I'll throw some clips in there. I have not been able to find it, but I've definitely read up on it big time from some people that I trust with their analysis, and I've really heard a lot of good things and a lot of things that I've seen through the games that I've watched. I believe what they said, and 2 of the 3 days, very impressed with his coverage skills, his movement ability, especially in one-on-ones against tight ends and running backs. This is an area where not only does he just give you, a guy that can drop into coverage and play zone and also slide to man coverage, he gives you that 3-down versatility. But then there's also the fact that he's also bringing some back, maybe even more back, of what you lost in Alex Anzalone. I mean, if Alex Anzalone is gone, when you look at your linebackers and you ask yourself, because lines are going to address, and you say, okay, what do we have here in terms of coverage? You really don't have much, or you don't know what you have, right? Derek Barnes hasn't shown you a ton of coverage. His zone coverage definitely is going to need work. We know that he has the speed, athleticism to get out in man coverage. It's an area that he's still been improving, and he looked better towards the end of the season, no question. But going back to his college, I decided movement was very rough. Getting a player that's played on those sub-package downs, that can play and drop into coverage and zone coverage, get a lot of depth, has that safety background. Those things are very beneficial to have on your team, to have that guy that can plug in and play. And he impressed at the Senior Bowl from everything that I've read. Bring that background and the ability to run with a tight end right up the seam route, right? The running right up the seams, he could flip, turn, and run with them, get in their hip. Then, of course, having some skills to attack the ball while the ball is in the air, to not make that an easy pass, and having height where they don't have a clear size advantage. 1, 2, maybe 3 inches for most tight ends you may have on him, but it's not a huge advantage where you always, even as a quarterback, would want to test that if he's able to get in the hip up a seam of a tight end. The area that I saw him utilize a lot more, seemingly, was zone coverage. It seemed like he played a lot more zone coverage. And this is very important, because I think this is where you really start to figure out, okay, can this guy fit for your defense and maybe some of the responsibilities the Lions will give him. And it's really everything here. Run defense, he checks the box by far, because I think he's a much better run defender than a guy that would be playing like the Jalen Reeves-Maven role. So he checks that box for me. Man coverage, I think he does enough here where you can check that box. I mean, sure, he doesn't give you maybe some of the upside as some of these other ultra uber athletic guys or safeties at like Sterling Weatherford, maybe in man coverage before his build. I think it's definitely good enough, definitely. But then you move on to zone coverage, and this is what it seemed like he did a lot more of. But there's good and there's bad in zone coverage. There's things that concern me, but there's things that you also really like. First thing is that he got a lot of depth in zone coverage drops. You could probably ask this guy to drop 15 plus yards downfield in zone coverage, and he's done it on sub packages, right? We saw Lions do it last year, where a lot of times sub packages, if they left the linebacker on the field, it would either be Jalen, but most times it was Alex Anzalone playing that role. And it makes sense, because if you put Derek Barnes on there, you don't love him as a coverage guy. So unless you're lining him up on the running back, he's probably just blitzing or taking the running back, right? So for this, you have a player that could probably bring a lot of different elements where you can leave him out there on those sub packages. And some people believe that'll be his initial transition if he can't start right away, because you never know, that sub packages will be his role. So at least if we're losing a guy like Alex Anzalone, I believe he could plug in and play to that role in zone coverage. Actions. Actually, I don't think he got bitten on as many play actions as I was kind of expecting to see. I thought play action might get him a little bit more than he did, because it seemed like he was keying on the running back big time. But then you start to notice that he's picking up very fast on what the offensive linemen are doing. So you may get one step down, but you're not getting him selling out downhill. He plays a little bit more of a patient style than that, yet he doesn't really bite heavy on play actions or things like that where he's completely out of play. I think Barnes had an issue with that early for sure. That doesn't seem to be the case. He's pretty disciplined, where you'll see how fast he picks up on tackles or tight ends if they stay in a block, or guards, where you'll initially see him kind of put his eyes on the offensive lineman, and as soon as he sees that they're not working upfield, he's like, oh snap, I got to drop. One of his best plays, this interception, and you can see it's kind of going back to the run reads. He sees the pulling offensive lineman, so he's getting himself in position to make a play against the run. All of a sudden, it turns into a play action, and then it's just that quick reaction paired with good ball skills to quickly just go up, snatch this thing out of the air. It's pretty. All right, not a lot of linebackers are just snatching that thing, and then, of course, finishing it off with a touchdown. And because of that, there's not a lot of false steps there. It's like maybe one step forward and I'm back into coverage. So that's something that you love, because he's not biting very heavy on these, play action fakes on early downs that they try to go right behind your linebackers. Then he has the height at 6'3", which is good. Some pretty solid arm length. Like I said, that interception went right through his hands over the middle of the field in the Senior Bowl. He's constantly working back and forth between quarterback's eyes and where are the routes, trying to see both at the same time, okay? He does a pretty good job of that, where he's not completely unknowing of what routes are going around him, where he's just following the quarterback's eyes. Sure, he plays the movement, so you can move him as a quarterback in zone coverage, but he follows the quarterback's eyes, yet at the same time, he does usually have a pretty good sense of where routes are going and what area he has and what routes are in his area. Not every route, but what routes in his area. So because of that, you'll see him sometimes peek back and forth, knowing where both is. And you saw it one time on a flat route where the quarterback's moving his eyes that direction, so he's flowing there, but he also sees the flat route. So he starts to get pushed a lot heavier to the flat, knowing that it's there, rather than just sitting in his zone where, yeah, you might pick up 5-10 yards if he just catches it and runs because he's got that much separation. One thing that does stick out as a concern is that there's a lot of occasions where it seems like he can just be a little step late. Not the most exceptional change of direction mover, yet I think he's light years ahead of where Derek Barnes was when he came out of the draft. When Derek Barnes came out of the draft and you watch him drop in his zone, it looked rough. There is room for improvement here in many different areas. One being that maybe continuing to stay low throughout the play. Sometimes he'll stand up a little bit too tall. Other times it's almost like he doesn't trust himself completely, and he's a little bit hesitant when he could probably just completely go and make a play on the ball. He just leaves a little bit too much space. Reason that he moves pretty well for his size is that he's always on his toes. If you watch him drop into covers, you're never going to see him flat-footed. He's always on his toes any way he moves, backwards, side to side, upfield. He's always playing on his toes. He's kind of moving side to side, a little bit backwards. He has this where everybody's saying clunky. He has this clunky, high gallop side to side, rather than being low and kind of shooting left to right. Not that he doesn't have the ability to get low and burst and accelerate, and you see it when the ball is coming, but he could be maybe a little more proactive there, maybe improve a little bit. I think that's an area where he improves as a whole, is kind of stamina. There were times where he would kind of sub in and out. You get it? The way that he's doing it, there's not tons of acceleration. He's staying balanced, but there's not a lot of acceleration to get to that spot, and that's an area that he could definitely improve. A little bit more deep knee bend, maybe a different technique, but that is an area where he definitely can improve. But when you throw in the ball skills, a lot of times being pretty smart with what he's seeing, I mean, you got to believe that he's got a pretty high ceiling that he could tap into. At the same time, he's not like super elite athletic. And sometimes you'll see that he reads quarterback's eyes a little late, trying to kind of see where both are. So sometimes when a snap hits, he'll find the route first and then he'll get the quarterback's eyes. He could be a little bit late to the party. And you'll see there's just a couple times where he's just a tick late, a step late from making a play, and he'll leave something there. 3 interceptions is nice. It shows growth. But there are plays where he's just a second late, he's just a second off from coming with a big play. Not easy to ask of a linebacker. Now, here's one of the biggest parts, and this could actually turn the Lions off more than anything. Honestly, I don't know for sure, but I'm saying it could. Now, let's not say he's bad at this, because I read someone's scouting report on him. They're like, he never blitzes. And I was like, hold up. I got like 4. I've just watched one game, and I have tons of clip watching him blitz. Like, what are they talking about? No, he will blitz. He's got 5.5 career sacks. He's coming off of 1.5 this past season. He had 3 the year before. The last 2 years, he's been good. But he's not scary as a blitzer. I guess that's the best way I would put it. He can blitz. He can do it on run plays and pass plays. You see it on run plays when he immediately just shoots a gap. And he's way less, reading and patient than he usually is, where he's playing fast, but also he's playing patient, and he's not getting out of spots. He's just shooting downhill. So he will blitz. 2 advantages I think he has here is, first off, he does a good job of attacking half the man, which really sticks out, especially with an offensive lineman. Just make sure you take on half. Understanding that part of it is not little. So running backs usually don't just pick him up. Now, who knows how that'll fare? Guys like Jamal probably could halt him. I'm going to be honest. That'd be good work. But at the same time, he does have enough mass where it's not an easy pickup for a running back. A lot of times they'll have to go low on him. So he can get some movement on running backs even if he is picked up. But at the same time, I wouldn't say he's a scary blitzer. He's not like Micah. He's not like a Nakobe Dean where it's like they blitzed him all the time. He would blitz, not all the time, but he's not scary when he's blitzing. Now, it's nice that he's done it because it gives you that threat defensively where it's like, okay, he could drop, he could man coverage my running back or tight end, he could play the run, or he could be blitzing. I don't know what he's doing on this play. So he could show a lot of things and you wouldn't know what's coming. But at the same time, he's not scary as a blitzer, I would say. He can do it. He's just not someone that frightens you. And that could be an area where the Lions would like to have maybe more of a scary threat, because you look at a guy like a Dean, and there's other linebackers in this class who just have the makeup to be freakier. But then you notice that he's smart as well, where he won't immediately, like if he thinks a running back's about to take out the backfield, he won't completely sell out. You'll see him sometimes give you that step, like, hold up, let me make sure this guy doesn't take off and be wide open. Give him that step, and then then he'll go. Can't guarantee that this clip is an example of it, but it looks like he's blitzing on this play. Number 8 out of the backfield here is manned up in the back end. But as you can see, as soon as he kind of starts to dive in it and then notices his play fake and he's leaking out, he drifts back and makes an interception, makes the play on the ball as the sack is already getting there. So I don't know if that was a blitz for sure. It was a really cool play that he made where it just seemed like a very heads-up play. But then he also had this really cool sack against Kent State where you kind of see him avoid the guard. I mean, a lot of it as a blitzing linebacker, because for most linebackers, getting picked up can be an issue unless you got pass rush moves like Micah Parsons. But for a lot of these guys, it's about coming around tight off of a tackle, maybe making a guard miss. It's a lot of timing, and this is a nice example of it. So that may be an area where I would call it his weakness, even though he's not necessarily bad. He's just not his strength at all. I would just say if there's any part of his game that's weakest, is probably as a blitzer. And that could steer lines away a little bit because they may want more of a threatening blitzer for their 2 inside linebackers like Derek Barnes. Derek Barnes is threatening when he blitzes. The issue is we couldn't stop the run. And then he couldn't play on passing downs either because we couldn't trust him in coverage. So for him, he didn't get the blitz very much. Yet when he blitzed, it could be scary. He just needs to be able to be out there more times. I think we'll see that next year. He'll probably blitz a lot more because he'll be on the field much more, and he'll be on the field much more on third downs. For him, he's not really scary. We saw with Alex and Jalen, they didn't do much when they blitzed. I mean, it was like, okay, they may have got a sack here. Muma's probably going to fall in that category. Probably like that. He's smart, though. He's smart. He'd probably fall into that kind of category. Probably more to an Alex Anzalone type of blitzer. So, overall, the guy's athletic. He checks all the boxes as a run defender. He can definitely move side to side. I love the size to speed combo. We'll see what he puts up at his combine. That could be very important to the Lions. I know because Brad Holmes finds it very important to see what the numbers are and then see, okay, did it show up on film? Why did it show up? Why did it not show up? So, those couple things will be important. Fact is, like Alex Anzalone, he showed out in the Senior Bowl, right? So he played well in the Senior Bowl. Then he also throw in the fact that he's got good size where, like the Saints, they could pair those guys together. I think he's got versatility to play in your defense. He could be a 3-down linebacker. I view him as a day one plug-in for a lot of teams where it's like, okay, we plug him in, he's going to be good to go. Honestly, I think he's a pretty well-rounded prospect, and he gives me a lot of Pete Werner type of vibes. We'll see if he can test up to that, though, because if he can run a 4.6 40, not only will the Lions probably look at him and be like, oh, snap, and we will look at him and be like, oh, snap. Also, in other NFL teams would be like, oh, snap, he ran a 4.6 40, right? And if he pushes a 4.7 4.8, then you're like, oh, that's not good. I think he may end up being one of the top linebackers in this year's class because I believe he serves an immediate impact. He's a very smart, heady linebacker that I think has a lot of versatility. May not be the Lions' exact cup of tea, may not be the flavor they love. You know, they might be looking for, some diet green tea, but instead they got raspberry. Okay, but if y'all know, raspberry might just be better than diet green tea, if you know what I'm saying, right? Hold up, now that I said that, I'm kind of thirsty. My point is, there could be other guys that fit a little bit better, right? But at the same time, I like a lot of things about him. If the Lions wanted to attack this, he would be a day one impact to me. If they want to go with more a guy that may be a little more developmental, that's fine. But I think you plug in and play this player, he can play at different spots, and he's good to go. And it's as simple as that. No matter what defense you're playing, you're going to find a role for this player defensively. But there are some traits that maybe he's not great at. A lot of people seem to be projecting around the mid-round, specifically round 3. I think a lot of that people are looking at as competition. He's also not a crazy athlete. Like, there are some linebackers that are crazy athletic. But I think for his size, if the Lions could grab this guy in, round 3 with either the comp pick or even an early pick, I wouldn't be mad at it. I think that would be an awesome feeling because I think Muma's going to end up being one of the best linebackers in this class. He'll probably be ranked extremely high on my boards when I get done with it. Look, he's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but I think pairing him with a guy like Derek Barnes to give you some of that coverage back, some of the upside where everybody's got to improve on coverage, but then just his instincts against the run, man, I think this guy is going to be an absolute stud, day one impact. I would jump on it if I had an opportunity to take him in the 3rd round because I didn't already go draft one or sign one in free agency. I would jump on that if there was that opportunity, if he was just sitting there. I think it'd be cool. I think we saw the Saints do something similar to it, and that's kind of the round where we've seen them go to linebackers, right? I mean, if you look at the Saints when Aaron Glenn was there, that's when they hit linebackers. Demario Davis, 3rd or 4th round. Alex Anzalone, 3rd round. Quan Alexander, I think 3rd round or 4th round, right? They're all in that range. So mid-rounds, right in the middle of the draft, I think it'd be a good time to do it. Pete Werner was the very end of the 2nd round. He was the 60th pick. So if this guy fell to round 3, count me in. Let's do it. That'd be money. Heck, I consider him taking him round 2 as well. But we'll see how the draft goes. Either way, if it is a round 3 pick and that's where he ends up, I would be cool if the Lions took him, and I'd be very happy with it. So there are other guys. We're going to go through them throughout the offseason. I just thought I'd hit on Muma because he's a guy I really like. I'm a very big fan of him, and he's one of my favorite linebackers. May end up being a top 3 linebacker in this year's class to me, but also to the actual NFL draft by the time we get there. We'll see. It just depends on what teams need and what teams are looking for. You know, that's what it comes down to. I don't know if the Bucs would draft a guy like this. I think the Bucs would lead heavier to an Kobe Dean style, but who knows? It just depends on the team. So anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.